Hello, all, and welcome to my humble abode. Today's book of the week, week 9, is A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. Now, this book, at first, because let me just admit, I am a very soft hearted person. I tend to get into a person's psyche and their problems become my problems. So I'm very, very, very in tune with others. At times, it can become my problem when it is not. So that's something I have to work on as a person because it can be very good in a lot of ways, but in some ways, it's very harsh for me as an individual. Where's Coco? Where's Coco? So the thing is, with this book, the beginning is talking about this man was basically a German Nazi camp prisoner for years. And he was a doctor who basically lived through it. He survived it and learned to tell about his story. And it goes into about 90 plus pages of life in camp and the people around him and how the mentality of a man, even at its stressors, can help others and take on a sort of pride in suffering, if you will. The pride and suffering, it kind of is almost like suffering becomes suffering no longer. It's almost a badge of honor, if you will. They got to see themselves worth suffering because of the people that they lost, and that it just goes into very deep details of sorrowful details of his experience in the Nazi camps, and being that was a tragic trial that happened in our history. It talked about the how the prisoners went from the low grade prisoners to people that just did the working, digging trenches, that dealt with daily abuse, eating liquid soup daily, being their services being exchanged for cigarettes and nothing basically, losing toes, losing family members, going from one camp to another, under stressors of life, to where these people basically didn't know if they were going to live or die every day. Every day was I might be here, I might not. I love this book. At first I did not, because it kind of made me depressed. That's what a better word to put it. It made me depressed because it's like I said earlier, it basically introduced all these trials and tribulations and woes, and I took on this man's suffering, this man's pain, and instead of me just reading it, I get into it. It's almost like when I'm reading a book, I can hear the voices, I can see the book played out as a movie in my head, and that becomes deep because it's almost as if I was there. And that's the beauty of it. He explains these situations pretty well. I love this book. But he adds, as he goes on, the reason for his books, and his he has a logotherapy that he basically talks about how it focuses on the meaning of life, or giving life meaning to be fulfilled in the future. And he has this way of explaining, how this is basically used, and how he's used it prior in his studies and whatnot, and how basically he had to kind of reconstruct himself, and him and people that he was in the camps with that survived, and being that he went through these excruciating things, and he kind of just touched on how he and others had to basically repersonalize themselves with the world. The end of this book gave me great respect for people that have been through these type of things. And I can't say that, I've ever met anyone that has been through such a trial. But to understand how he goes into depth with his logotherapy and talking about how people have their own different neurosis of the brain to where they just, they can't overcome certain things like the fear of death or whatever the case is, but the logotherapy is a way to get an understanding on all types of things that arise, even something like a fear of death. But wow, I love this book. I suggest you go out and read this book. I expect you give it a glance or two and get into depth about it. It's broken up into about 3 or 4 sections. First is talking about the Nazi camp. Second is talking about the logotherapy and putting it in a nutshell, because he has another book out that also touches bases on the logotherapy and goes into greater detail, as he says. Well, that's my review, and I also wanted to put you on to something today. Hemp seeds. Now, hemp seeds are organic. They're vegan, hello, and they're a source of protein. 8 grams of protein per serving, and on this package, a serving is 2 tablespoons. 2 tablespoons of this, and you have 8 grams of protein. Go figure. You know how they always tell you got to get your protein through meat. No, you don't. All right, well, that's my nugget. I hope you enjoyed the book. I hope you go out and read it, and I hope you get a better understanding in reading it for yourself. That was my understanding, my take on the book in these short little words. All right, thank you for watching. Enjoy your day and love yourself. Bye-bye.